Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Allison. I am a school librarian living and working in Austria, and today I want to share with you everything I have read so far in 2022. So basically, when this year started and I was thinking about what I wanted to do on YouTube, I didn't really like doing wrap-ups every single month, mostly because, I don't know, it just wasn't that fun for me. So I decided I was going to switch to quarterly reading wrap-ups instead, which I realize is a lot of books to get through in one video, but I also kind of hoped that it would help me be more concise when talking about the books. So I am going to hopefully quickly, in like only a sentence or two, tell you just how I felt about each of the 56 books I read in January, February, and March of this year. So let's get into it. The first book I read in 2022 was I Kissed Cheryl Wheeler by Casey McQuiston, and I loved this book. I feel like it is sort of a cross between Paper Towns and John Tucker Must Die. There's mystery and there's drama, and it is just kind of everything you could want from a YA book. So I definitely thought that it was a great book to start the year off. Then I read Full Flight by Ashley Schumacher, and I really liked Ashley Schumacher's first book. I had very high hopes for this second book. And because of that, I didn't really go into it knowing very much about it, and that was a mistake because it's a very sad book. That's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not saying it's a bad book. I am saying that I did not expect it, and I found it to be devastating. Sorry, the second cat has entered the room. I don't know if you can tell from the camera, but Molly is sitting directly behind me. Minerva just came in for a snack, so we're all in here for this video. Next up was Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellfleur, and even though this romance novel had been getting so much hype on the Bookturnet, I was not, I don't know, it just didn't seem like it was something that I would be interested in. First of all, I don't care that much about astrology. I realize that like someone's choice of profession shouldn't dictate whether you read a book about them or not, because their life is so much more than that. But I just am not into astrology, so I was sort of like, eh. And you know, as much of an advocate as I am for queer books when I'm reading romance, I do tend toward more straight romances. I'm not saying that that's a good choice, it is just my tendency. However, Written in the Stars was as adorable and wonderful and amazing as everyone has ever said, and I definitely loved it and shouldn't have waited as long as I did to read it. So there's that. And then I read Hang the Moon, which is a companion to Written in the Stars. So like, I know there's a third one. I don't know if she's going to stop at 3 or if there will be more, but these 3 romances are all set in the same universe and focus on like different characters from different books. So Hang the Moon focuses on the love interest from the first book, Darcy, her younger brother, and I think her like childhood best friend who moves back to the area. Either way, the male love interest is like the geeky man of my dreams, and he is my new favorite book boyfriend, and I think that I liked Hang the Moon even more than I liked Written in the Stars, but I would recommend both of them. So then I read A Season for Second Chances by Jenny Bayless, and to be quite honest, I do not have a lot of memories of this one. I know that the main character separates from her husband and she goes to be the caretaker of this little cabin up in like a remote small town, and it's wintertime and it's cold, and there's a romance between her and the like grouchy son or nephew or something of the elderly person whose house she's taking care of. But I feel like I liked it at the time. I didn't find anything offensive about it, but at this moment, like, I feel like, yeah, it was fine. If you like books set in small towns in some part of the United Kingdom, which is admittedly something that I really like, then go for it. Then I read The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich, which was my book club's pick for the month of January. And even though I always want to read more Indigenous authors, I also don't read a lot of historical fiction, so it was a struggle to make myself read this for book club. But by the time I actually opened the book and started reading, I actually really enjoyed it. I liked how it focused on sort of two different main characters and what they were going through in life, and there was mystery weaved in, and there was, of course, the perspective on what it is like to be Native and live on a reservation and all of those things. So it was definitely unexpectedly good. That sounds terrible. I'm not saying that, obviously, Louise Erdrich is an acclaimed writer. I just don't like historical fiction, so I was pleasantly surprised that I did enjoy the book. Okay, then I read Love and Other Great Expectations by Becky Dean, and this is about a girl who goes to England to complete a scavenger hunt, and there's some sort of competition, some prize that I do not remember. And again, I love books that have travel. I love books that have scavenger hunts. I was not thrilled at how much this book focused on classic literature being sort of the be-all and end-all of what great books can be. So that aspect kind of annoyed me. I feel like the romance aspect was fine. Again, this is a book that I'm sort of there's nothing for me to not recommend it to you, but it doesn't stick out in my mind as a new favorite either. So it was, yeah. Then I reread The Tourist Attraction by Sarah Morgenthaler, because I really liked that book when I first read it, and I wanted to continue with the series, but I felt that it had been so long that I wanted to reread that one first. And then I didn't end up reading the next two books after that. I still want to. I enjoyed The Tourist Attraction as much the second time as I did the first time. Grumpy Sunshine is a fun trope, and I enjoy the Alaska setting, but I just didn't get around to the next couple of books. So again, crossing my fingers that will happen eventually. Then I read Once More with Chutzpah by Haley Neal, which I have very complicated feelings about. I am all for more Jewish representation in books, but this is set on sort of the equivalent of A Birthright Trip to Israel, which I have very complicated feelings about Israel and what they are currently doing in Palestine, and so I'm not really going to talk more about the book or more about those feelings, but I did read it. Then I read The Sweet Spot by Trish Doller, which is a companion to her adult romance novel Float Plan, which I loved, and The Sweet Spot was really great. It had a really nice romance. I loved the premise of the book. The main character left her hotel job in Florida to move to this really remote area in, I think, Ohio, somewhere on one of the Great Lakes in one of the Midwest states, and I'm pretty sure it's Ohio. Yeah, because they talk about Cedar Point, so it must be Ohio. Anyway, and the romance is just really good, and I loved the setting. So definitely recommend. Next, I read Farah Rojan's The Boyfriend Project. As you can see, I read a lot of adult romances in January because that was sort of all I wanted to read during that month. Last year, I really wanted to read 250 books, and I got that goal, but I do feel like I burnt myself out a little bit on reading, and so I told myself that it was totally fine to be slower about things this year, and that there was no need to constantly try to read more books the next year than you did the year before. So when I wasn't wanting to read a ton of books, and then when I only was wanting to read romance, I told myself that that was fine. And that's tangent over. I read The Boyfriend Project. It was excellent. This man was catfishing. No, not catfishing. This man was attempting to date 3 women at the same time and lie about it. And when they confronted him, it went viral. And the story sort of takes place in the aftermath of that. The main character is the one who sort of was the leader of the confrontation, and so it sort of focuses on her life and how she's dealing with that. But of course, it's a romance novel. There's another man, and he, while not, attempting to date several different women at a time, is also hiding things. And so, like, that aspect of the romance and how they're headed for trouble. I really liked that. Then was The Dating Playbook, also by Farah Rojan, which is the second book in this. I mean, it's not really a series because they all focus on different main characters, but in that same universe. I think that I liked that one even more than The Boyfriend Project, so, and I can't wait to read the third one, which I think either came out earlier this year or comes out very soon, so that's exciting. Then was Must Love Books by Shauna Robinson, which is about a woman who is working in publishing but hasn't really made the progress in her career in terms of advancing up the career ladder or advancing salary-wise, and things are just not going great, so she makes some questionable decisions about her career and has to deal with the consequences of those actions. And I generally love books that sort of take place in the world of publishing or anything book related, but I just really didn't love this one, and I don't know why. Again, there's nothing wrong with it, it just wasn't a favorite. Next, I read the graphic novel Himawari House by Harmony Becker, and that is about a group of students who are all living in the same house and studying in Japan, and it was fantastic. I am not a big graphic novel reader, but I have been trying to read more. That's part of one of my goals this year, so this was my first graphic novel of the year, and it was off to a great start. Next, I read Castles in Their Bones by Laura Sebastian, and I loved it so much. I haven't actually read Laura Sebastian's earlier YA trilogy, even though it's been on my TBR for a while. I brought Ash Princess with me to Austria, but I read Castles in Their Bones because I was doing a post on it for my blog as part of a blog tour, and I loved it so much. I thought that the fantasy concept was interesting and didn't feel like something I'd read before. Each of the main characters, there are 3 of them, 3 sisters, who all go to different neighboring kingdoms to marry higher-ups in the government there as a way, as part of their mother's plan to cement her own power and sort of control more parts of the empire. And they all had distinctive personalities, and I really liked reading about how they were going about accomplishing the goals that their mother had set for them. And it ended with kind of a big twist that I didn't actually see coming, and now I really, really want the second book, like ASAP. And that's everything I read in January. In February, for Black History Month, I read almost entirely books by Black authors. I think there's maybe one that I was reading to review for a professional publication that wasn't by a Black author, but everything else was. So the first one that I read was Fast Pitch by Nick Stone, which is her second middle grade novel about a girl who plays softball. And at this moment, I am not remembering any other details about it. I do know I liked it. I hadn't realized when I initially read it that it was a companion to Clean Getaway, the first middle grade novel she wrote, so I kind of wish that I had read Clean Getaway first, but I don't think you need to in order to enjoy or understand Fast Pitch. And you know, I'm always wanting more books with girls playing sports, and Nick Stone gave us that with Fast Pitch. So if you are looking for more middle grade books with girls who play sports, this is a good one. Then I read Only on the Weekends by Dean Atta, which is his second novel. He got a lot of attention for The Black Flamingo, which came out a couple of years ago, and which I really enjoyed. So I was excited to read the second book. The main character has to go with his dad to Scotland, where his dad is filming a documentary about a trans boy, and the main character is trying to make it work long distance with his boyfriend from, I think they live in London, but at the same time developing feelings for this boy in Scotland and trying to figure all of that out. And it is also a novel in verse, as Black Flamingo was, and it was just really, really great. I definitely recommend picking it up. Then I read You Truly Assumed by Layla Sabrine, which is about 3 Muslim girls who start a blog that is sort of a way for Muslim girls to support one another and sort of, like defying the stereotypes about Muslim people. I thought that every single character had a great and distinct voice, and while there are more books about Muslim people being published these days, we don't often get perspectives from a more intersectional population like Black Muslims, so I think that that's an important reason to pick this one up, but aside from that, it's just a really great book. Next, I read Blackbirds in the Sky by Brandy Colbert. I will read anything Brandy Colbert writes, even if it is nonfiction, which is not my favorite. And this is about the Tulsa race massacres, which, shockingly, I did not learn about in school in my history curriculum. And I picked up a little bit more about what happened as I've, been educating myself these past few years about the US's more unsavory parts of history. But this was a really great, accessible, because it is written for YA, so it's really for young adults. It's an accessible way to learn more about this period in history. And I'm not going to say that I liked it, because of course it is about an awful event and it was really hard to read. And I hate that our history is full of these types of events, but I think that it's important and well written and informative and accessible. So like, while I didn't like it, I think that the book has a lot of merit and deserves a place on anyone's shelves. Then I went back to romance and read Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson. And I didn't have really strong feelings about this one either way. I loved the setting in Harlem because, again, I am missing New York City and wanting to read anything that is set there these days. And I really liked the idea of these 4 brothers owning a knitting shop. So it was good, but again, like, the romance didn't stand out to me too much. It just wasn't memorable. Nothing bad, but nothing to put it on my favorites list either. Still, if you like romance, if you like knitting, if you like books set in New York, then you might want to check that one out. Then I read Required Reading for the Disenfranchised Freshman by Kristen R. Lee, which was another one of those books, sort of like Ace of Spades, that I feel like was so well done and so important, but I also hated it because I hate that books like that have to exist. And this is about a girl who ends up going to the equivalent of an Ivy League university. It's a fictional university, but it is sort of like going to Yale, basically. And just her experience being there as a Black female student and all of the micro and macro aggressions that she has to deal with as she goes through that, and sort of grapples with whether it would have been a better choice to go to a historically Black college or university, even though that doesn't give her the same prestige as an Ivy League university. And again, I thought that it was really well done. I always enjoy books that are set in college because, I don't know, I think that's a nice area that there aren't too many books set in. And again, many parts of it were difficult to read. I think that it's great that books like this exist because there are teenagers who go through those same experiences and need to see that they're not alone. But again, I really wish that we did not have to have books like that. I read Maya and the Robot by Eve L. Ewing, and it was a middle grade book that was a really fast read and a really cute read. The main character is super into science, and she builds a robot for her science fair, but there's some other stuff going on in her life, and things happen, and the robot sort of destroys the science fair. I mean, there's a lot more going on, but there's a lot of humor, you know, there's a lot of focus on girls in STEM and family relationships and community relationships, and it's just a really great, fast middle grade read. Then I read Mom Jeans and Other Mistakes by Alexa Martin. This was more in the category of women's fiction than romance, which I didn't realize because I know that her other series about like football players that I can't remember any of the names of right now is romance, but I really, really enjoyed this one about 2 friends who they have sort of relationships that kind of implode, and so they decide to move in together and support each other. One of them has a young child, and it's just the story of their lives. Of course, both of them have really complicated relationships with their families and former romantic partners, and are struggling with some things that influence how they work together and take care of one another. And I think it's just, I don't know, it's something that didn't seem like I'd read it before, and so I really enjoyed reading it. Then I read How We Can Win by Kimberly Jones. Kimberly Jones is a young adult author. She has co-written a couple of books. I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, and something that has the word fly in the title that I don't remember. Is the person who, after George Floyd, she went viral with her speech about like how it was basically a rigged game of Monopoly for Black people, and how they got into the economically disadvantaged place that they are. And so this sort of, I guess it's sort of an evolution or something that came from that initial video, a chance for her to sort of flesh those ideas out and go more in depth with them, and like outline a way for Black people and people of color to overcome those disadvantages as best they can. Anyway, I don't know if that was the most eloquent summary of the book. I really enjoyed it. I recognize that it's not written for me, but again, I am always trying to read more books from other perspectives, and this was that. And if you are looking to do that as well, I definitely recommend you read that one. Then I read A Killer Sunday by Abby Collette. This is the next book in her cozy mystery series that centers around an ice cream shop in Ohio. And again, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I read cozy mysteries because I feel like they're easy and they don't require a ton of brain power, and they're usually pretty fun, but I don't necessarily think of them as like my favorite books ever, and this is sort of the same. I have to say that there is one friend of the main character who just really rubs me the wrong way with her like entire attitude and personality, and I think for that reason this series isn't a favorite when it comes to cozy mysteries, but still I wouldn't not recommend it to you. Then I read Angel of Greenwood by Randy Pink, and this is a historical fiction novel set also during the Tulsa Race Massacre, and I think that it was really great to read this pretty soon after reading Blackbirds in the Sky, because I had so much more historical context that just made the experience even richer for me. Again, this is one of those books where I thought it was a really great book, and I wish that it didn't have to exist. I liked the story. I just, it's about, the story is about two teenagers and their relationship, but it's set against the backdrop of this awful event that happened, which is terrible. But it is a good book, it's an important book. If you like historical fiction, then I definitely recommend reading it. Next was The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, and I never thought I would read this book. When I first read the description, it just sounded like such an abstract concept to me that it would never be a book that I would pick up. But so many people said they loved it, on top of my desire to read anything and everything set in New York City these days made me pick it up, and it was as incredible as everyone said. Once I sort of wrapped my mind around this idea that cities can be living things and that there can be people who are like the living representatives of those cities, then I don't know, I just like embraced it and went with it and was like, okay, this is a thing that could happen. And I thought that the characters who represented each of the boroughs, just their personalities matched their boroughs so well, and it was just like a chance to be back in New York for the duration of the book, and I just loved it so much. Next I read Fake It Till You Bake It by Jamie Wesley. And this is about a football player who starts a bakery with some of his teammates and a woman who gets a job in that bakery. She's a woman who sort of hasn't had a lot of direction when it comes to her career, and she's really still looking for her thing. And she agrees to work here for a certain amount of time in order to, I believe, get access to her trust fund from her grandmother, who happens to own the team that the bakery owner plays on, but this connection isn't known at the beginning. And of course, it's a romance, so feelings develop, but it's also, about cupcakes, which is great. I really enjoyed it. I don't remember a lot of details other than those, but I did really like it at the time. Then I read All the Right Reasons by Bethany Mandel, and this is described as The Bachelor meets Gilmore Girls, which automatically drew me in. Even though I really don't like The Bachelor itself, I do like most books that have reality dating shows as a central concept. Don't ask me why, it's just a particular quirk of mine. So in this particular universe, the new dating show is that a single parent and their child is going on a dating show to try to meet other single parents with children, and so it will be more about finding a family match instead of just like two people becoming a couple. And so the main character and her mom end up becoming the contestants for this show and have to find a match amongst all of the dads and kids. And it's really funny, and there is really great banter. There were, of course, some things that really annoyed me, as is often the case with young adult books with bad parents. It's just a pet peeve of mine. But aside from that, I thought that it was really great, definitely humorous, and as a side note, I wouldn't say that it's a rom-com in the sense that a romance is the central focus for the main character, but there is a nice romance for her that develops, and that sort of complicates the situation with her mom and her trying to find a romance. So it was a really fun read. That is everything that I read in February. Then we moved into March, which, as I have mentioned in a couple of other videos, I was trying to read pretty much only middle grade books for the month of March in an effort to read more middle grade than I did last year. And there were definitely times when I kind of needed a break and did read a couple of adult books in there, but for the most part I read a lot of middle grade. The first thing I read was Secret Garden on 81st Street, which is a graphic novel by Ivy Noel Weir, Amber Padilla, and and based on The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And I thought that this was so well done. However, I will give the caveat that I have not actually ever read The Secret Garden, so I don't know how true to that story it is. I cannot give you any information on that. However, it was a really great setting of New York City, and I just thought that the art was magical. That's pretty much all I have to say. I would say that if you are a fan of the original Secret Garden, I definitely wouldn't skip this one, but if you like graphic novels in general or just middle grade fiction, I would check it out as well. Then I read How to Become a Planet by Nicole Melody, which was a really interesting portrayal of a middle grade girl with depression. I haven't read a ton of middle grade books with mental health representation. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I am saying that I thought this was really well done. I think that it really realistically portrayed the struggles and setbacks and ups and downs that can come with working on your mental health. It's not a straight path from sick to better. It's something that constantly needs caring, and I think that aspect was really well done. There's also a really nice budding romance in this one, and the romantic interest is sort of in the early stages of figuring out that in the story, she is presenting as a girl, but she's sort of questioning whether girl is her identity and if she may be non-binary or something else. So that, I think, was really well done as well, even though it is a secondary character. So, all in all, How to Become a Planet is a solid middle grade read. Then I jumped off the middle grade bandwagon for a second to read The Rocky Road to Ruin by Mary Allen, which is the first book in a new cozy mystery series, which is also set in an ice cream shop. This one I just thought it was really weird that the main character is a librarian for the CIA, and like that was emphasized a fair amount, but that background never really came into play. I was just questioning, like, why are you emphasizing it so much if she's not going to use those skills in solving the mysteries? But that's just like a me pet peeve, and I still overall enjoyed it as a cozy mystery. I don't know, maybe it's set up for future books in the series. I just saw that the second book is up on NetGalley, so maybe I'll read that one and see if things go in a direction that I like. Either way, it was a perfectly fine cozy mystery. Then I read The Not So Uniform Life of Holly May by Christina Matula, and I really loved this middle grade book. It is set in Hong Kong. The family moves there from, I believe, Canada. And so it's just a whole different environment for the main character. And on top of that, when they get to Hong Kong, her mom seems to have a total like personality shift and is always talking about how like they have to make a good impression and they have to make the right connections and all of these things that have never like seemed to be important to her mom before. And so she's feeling all of this pressure from her mom, as well as like the issues with adjusting to a new school and all that comes with that. So I just thought that that was all really interesting and well done. Plus, I really liked the setting of Hong Kong. So overall, a really great book. Then I read Chester Keane Cracks the Code by Tekla Magoon. I was really, really excited for this book because I have so much love for The Season of Six Malone by Tekla Magoon. Like, that's one of my all-time favorite middle grade novels, and I think it's so funny, and I was hoping for the same thing here. I was just a little bit disappointed, and I'm not saying that it's not a good book. It definitely is. It just, I was hoping for more humor, and that's just not really how the main character is, and that's totally fine. I still thought it was a really good book. The main character, Chester, he is pretty convinced that his dad is a spy and is sending him secret messages, and like that's why he's not present in his life, because he's off on these like super dangerous secret missions and all of that. And so when he gets this clue to solve the scavenger hunt with this other kid from his school, he's pretty convinced that it's his dad like trying to get him to do these things because he is in trouble, and so he needs to crack the code. But it turns out that Chester has totally misread that situation, and there's a whole lot of other stuff going on, and it leads to kind of some heartbreak for Chester. But it's still a really interesting book. There's a scavenger hunt. It's very like action and adventure oriented, and I still really liked it and definitely think it's a good book. Then I started the City Spies series by James Ponti, and this has quickly become one of my new all-time favorite middle grade series. I read all 3 of the books that are out during this month. I'll talk about the other 2 when they come up in the list. But I really, really hope there are going to be more. I really hope that this is a series that will not ever end because they are so much fun. I think that you do need to, suspend your disbelief a little bit that an intelligence organization like MI6 would have a secret operation that trains child spies, but it's still just so fun. These kids who are orphans are sort of collected by this man named Mother when he sees that they have special talents, and they all come and live this remote secret site in Scotland, and by day their cover is they attend this pretty posh school there, but they are often going on secret missions around the world to save people and protect the world from the bad guy equivalent of MI6, and it's just so fun, such a quick read, so much personality in all the characters. I love them so much. Then I read The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin, and I did not love it. I feel like this is a perennial favorite of people who like middle grade. It's recommended all the time. Even lots of kids say they like it, and I read it and I was so bored. I feel like it's a pretty short book. The copy that I had was only 185 pages maybe, and it took me so long to get through it. I was just I don't know, I could not find it interesting. So that was a dud for this month, but one of few, I would say. Then I read Forward March by Skye Quinlan, and again, I read this for review, but it is such a great book. First of all, it involves marching bands, which is always excellent. Second of all, it involves catfishing, which is, not excellent as a thing that happens, but fun as a concept for a YA book. And there's such good asexual representation. There's also other queer representation that's really great as well. I definitely had some issues with the so-called friends of the main character because they were irredeemably terrible human beings. But aside from that, the romance itself was really great, and there was a lot of humor and just lots of good stuff. I had some issues with the parents, which I'm not going to get into it. I don't want this to become a political rant, but it did make me angry. Nonetheless, Forward March was still good. Then I read Sweet and Sour by Debbie Michiko-Florence, which one of the things that I think that she does really well is writing really great middle grade appropriate romances. I feel like a lot of middle grade books don't include an element of romance because many kids in that age range aren't at that point in their lives yet, but there are some who are, and I think that the way she does it seems to me to be realistic and well done. And so I thought the same thing about this one as I did about her book that I read before, Keep It Together, Kiko Carter. Romances are sort of central to those stories, but in a really appropriate tween way. And so I thought this was equally well done. I also loved the summer house setting of this book, and the enemies to lovers. You can't really call it that when it's a middle grade book, but enemies to liking each other again trope. Then I read the second City Spies book. I don't have a ton to add to my initial wholehearted recommendation. I recommend this one as well. Then I read Much Ado About Baseball by Rajni LaRocca, which is sort of a companion to Midsummer's Mayhem. I loved Midsummer's Mayhem with my entire heart, and I wanted to love this one as much, but much like the fairies, I am more of a sweet person than a salty person, so I just didn't love it as much. But I will say that the combination interests of math and baseball was really unique, and really fun. And it's still a really good book. I just am always going to gravitate towards the books that involve baking as opposed to salty snacks. But that's just me, and I still recommend it. Then I read Twins, the graphic novel by Marian Johnson and Shannon Wright, and it was excellent. These two twins go to middle school, and one wants to sort of break off from the other and establish her own identity, and some hurt feelings and miscommunications lead to both of them running against one another for president of their class, and that has the potential to turn ugly, and in some instances it does, but there is an acceptable resolution as well. It sadly did not end the way I wanted it to, but I still thought it was a really great graphic novel. Next up was Res Dogs by Joseph Ruchak, which is actually set during like the early days of the coronavirus pandemic. So I thought that that was just a really interesting snapshot in history. The book itself is really short and it's written in verse, so it's a very quick read, and it's mainly about the story of a dog who comes and sort of adopts this family on the reservation where the main character is staying away from her parents with her grandparents as everyone is sheltering in place in the early weeks of the pandemic. And like the story itself is fine, but I just thought it was so interesting to read about the things that we were doing not so long ago when this was still very new and we didn't know as much as we do now. So again, although it's only 2 years past, it does feel like a significant look at a point in history. Then I read Katie the Cat Sitter, which is another graphic novel by Colleen A.F. Venable and Stephanie Yu, or Yue, I'm not sure, and I apologize. And I think this was my favorite of all the graphic novels I read so far this year. I really did think that it was only going to be about a girl who took care of cats, but no. In this universe, superheroes are just par for the course, and this one superhero, possibly super villain, happens to live in Katie's building and have a lot of cats, and when Katie figures out their true identity and that they might be in trouble, she and the cats need to go and help them. It was just a lot of fun. Plus, anything with cats is a good book. Then I read Blackbird Girls by Anne Blankman, and this is historical fiction set during the Chernobyl disaster. And it was very difficult to read this book in the early days of the war going on in Ukraine, because I think there are a lot of parallels between what happened throughout the history of the Soviet Union and what is happening with Russia and the former Soviet countries, particularly Ukraine, today. And so, aside from the fact that Chernobyl was a horrific disaster that had a ton of tragedies associated with it, now we're seeing the same, not a nuclear disaster, of course, but the same type of thing where terrible things are happening in Ukraine and people have to flee their homes and embark on dangerous journeys and live in situations they normally wouldn't because of how certain people in power are handling things. Anyway, it is a good historical fiction book. I personally liked it because it wasn't set during World War II, but if you are just a fan of historical fiction in general or want to learn more about the history of the Soviet Union, I think it would be a good book to read. So then I read The Barren Grounds by David Alexander Robertson, and this is a portal fantasy. So these two foster children go into this room in their attic that's sort of like not in use because of construction, and they find there a portal to this land that has been in eternal winter for a very long time, because another human at one point in time went through the portal and he stole the summer birds, and so the rest of the world has been in this like horrible winter, and there isn't food and things are just bad. And all of the creatures who live there are like giant walking, talking animals. So it's really fun. I think that it's a really great story if you are a fan of the Chronicles of Narnia, but would prefer to recommend something that is not so old or so overtly Christian. This is a great thing to recommend for that. And then, speaking of things that you could recommend in place of classics, I next read the Las Cuentista by Donna Barba Higuera, and if you know people who are fans of The Giver or who still read The Giver in their classes, it would be great if you suggested this as a new book, because the Las Cuentista is, first of all, amazing, and second of all, such a good recommendation for all those people who read The Giver. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, The Giver, that is. I'm just saying, like, if you want to recommend something that is written in this century, then The Las Cuentista is the dystopian novel you need to hand to children. So the main character in this book, she and her family are chosen to go on one of these ships. There have been planets found that are going to, or there's been a planet found that is close enough to the conditions on Earth that they're going to go into suspended animation for, I don't know, hundreds of years, like 300 something years, I think, and then wake up and terraform and turn this into a new civilization, because Halley's Comet, the path is altered and it's going to hit the Earth, so you need that. But there are some people on Earth called, I think, the Collective, who want like unity and no dissent and everyone to be exactly the same. And there's this sort of, I don't know if it's a rebellion, but somehow, while the main character of this book is in suspended animation, they end up taking everything over. So it's just got a lot of sort of similar ideas to The Giver. It is just very like classically dystopian, but I love the like adventure element. I love the storytelling element. I love the finding a new planet element. All of those things are really great. There is some like heartbreak in this book as well, but it was just so good. So I'm going to stop rambling about that now. Then I read the third City Spies book, which again, I loved with my whole heart and was as good as the first and second, and I don't have anything else to say about that. Then I read Long Distance by Whitney Gardner. It is another graphic novel, and it was really kind of weird. So this girl gets sent to summer camp to make new friends, because I think her family has recently moved to a new city. But it turns out that this summer camp is not legitimate. It's in fact being held in space by an alien who wants to make human friends and has seen like all of these human movies about friendship and is trying to replicate those experiences. And it was just so weird. Like, I really enjoyed it. I thought that the story was interesting. It's just when we got to that part, I was like, what is happening? So, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, I just think that it's really weird. Then I read Different Kinds of Fruit by Kyle Lukoff, and again, this is a new all-time favorite of mine. There was just so much to love about this book. The main character, she and her family live in a somewhat small and insulated community, and she's never really questioned that people there are like open and accepting and kind, and then a new student comes to school and they are non-binary, and this sort of sets off a bunch of things that are happening. She, the main character of the book, learns some things about her parents that she didn't know, and her parents are sort of harboring some not great opinions due to some of their own trauma in the past, and there's some stuff going on at her school with, you know, curriculum issues and people coming in and saying that if it's not, you know, white, straight, and Christian, it shouldn't happen here, and all of that stuff. So just a lot of pushing on the status quo, and it's such an amazing book. And from it, I learned that vegetables are a lie, which is probably the most interesting and important piece of knowledge I've learned in my lifetime. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, then read that book. Then I again took a little middle grade break. I read the Cartographers by Peng Shepherd, and I don't know what I was expecting from this book. I thought that it was interesting and good, but also strange and did not go the directions I expected. I also don't even know how to categorize this book. I mean, I guess it's like sort of a mystery and sort of contemporary and a little bit like fantastical, but I wouldn't say fantasy really, so it's hard to put it into a category. I also thought that, I don't know, the ending is not what I was expecting, and I'm not certain that I'm happy with it, and I do think that definitely too many people died in the book. Nonetheless, I still found it to be an enjoyable read. I had high hopes for it, possibly because of my own deep and abiding love of maps, but I don't know if it met those expectations, but I still enjoyed reading it. Next, I read Sea and Winter by Christine Day. This was another really quick contemporary middle grade read about a girl who was a pretty serious ballet dancer, and an injury sort of has her trying to figure out what her life is going to be like now, because she was on track to be a ballerina, and that was what she wanted, and that was how her life was going to go, and she needs to reevaluate that, and she is struggling. And so I thought that that was all really well done, and I thought that the aspects of Indigenous heritage were really seamlessly woven into the story as well, so it was just overall a really great story. Next, I read A Place at the Table by Sadia Faruqi and Laura Chauvin, and I know I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I loved this one too. If you put cooking or baking into a book, I am going to pick it up. Absolutely, there's no question about that. And in this book, one of the main characters' moms is teaching an Asian cooking class as an after-school activity. The other main character, her mom, suffers from depression, and her dad travels all the time for work, so she wants to learn how to cook so she's not always eating like boxed macaroni and cheese or whatever. And so she takes the cooking class. There's of course a lot of stuff to contend with in terms of, well, racism mostly. I think that the elements of racism were done in a way that is accessible and understandable to middle grade readers. Reading this book, I was hungry the entire time. I just wanted all of the food that they made, and I really loved the development of the friendship between the two main characters. So all in all, like, wholeheartedly recommend A Place at the Table. Then I read Winnie Zhang Unleashes a Legend by Katie Zhao, and this was another one that I really loved. Like I mentioned, I don't know if I said this in a video or if I said it to myself or on Twitter. I'm not sure like how Rick Riordan decides what books are going to be part of his imprint and what authors and what mythological stories are going to be told, but I feel like based on what I've read from Katie Zhao so far, she should be writing for Rick Riordan Presents, and this book is no exception. It was so fun and so action-packed. I just feel like talking about it too much. I want you to discover for yourself how great it is, so I don't want to say too much other than I loved the adversarial relationship between the main character and the other person that she was sort of forced to work with in order to save her town from demons. I thought that the reveal at the end of who like the true demon was, or I don't know if it's technically a demon or like some sort of spirit, that was really great as well. It was such a fun book. It was full of humor, it was full of action, it was full of fantastical elements, so everything you would want in a middle grade fantasy, in my opinion. Then I read Always Jane by Jen Bennett, and usually if it's a book written by Jen Bennett, it's a book I'm going to love. That is how I felt about every single book of hers that I have read so far. This one was just okay. I don't really know what it was about it that like didn't give me the same swoony Jen Bennett romance vibes, but I just didn't love it as much. I did enjoy the romantic interest. He was pretty great, but I think that both he and the main character made some questionable choices that kind of bugged me, and I did not like the main character's obsession with this person who was generally a terrible person. So all of that, I don't know. Again, it's not a bad book. It just wasn't at the level that I felt for like Starry-Eyed or Serious Moonlight. But still worth reading. Next, I read Small Town Pride by Phil Stamper. This is his first middle grade book, and I loved it so much. I know, I'm a broken record, I'm sorry. So the main character in this book has recently come out, and his parents and friends have all been supportive, but it turns out that not everyone in the town is. And his dad, like, in trying to be supportive, puts up this, like, gigantic pride flag, and then the mayor starts to get all of these complaints, and people are like, what if this leads to a pride festival? The main character, of course, is like, well, wouldn't it be great if we had a pride festival in our small town in Ohio? And so he and his friends work toward achieving that, and the less than accepting grown-ups work toward thwarting them, and it's just a great story all around, and it does have a happy ending. And then the last book I read in the first quarter of 2022 was The Many Mysteries of the Finkel Family by Sarah Caput. And this, so basically, let me say, I read Sarah Caput's first middle grade book, and I thought that the voice was amazing, and it was like so wonderful, and I had super high expectations for this one, and that's not entirely fair, but I just didn't love it as much. I did think that it was great to have multiple characters on the autism spectrum in this story. I thought that it showed a lot of different representation, which is great because, as we know, autism is a spectrum and neurodiversity does not look the same for all people. So seeing that was great, and there was also some ADHD representation as well. Again, all of that was really good. I thought that the main character's journey through the story, like, I understand her path and her perspectives, it just wasn't my favorite thing to read about. That being said, it's not a bad book. I do think it's an important book, and I absolutely would recommend it to anyone who likes family stories and complex relationships and wants to see more neurodiverse representation and ADHD representation in middle grade books. Okay, that was a lot of books and a lot of information. If you want to tell me any of the books that you read in the first quarter that you are particularly excited about, I would love if you would leave a comment. Otherwise, I will see you next time.